Okay, so I just want to reiterate what I had mentioned in the last video about the actual database that is created when you execute a create table statement, or create database and then create the tables. Basically, this is my project folder for the whole project, and I had mentioned that whatever you call your database in this line, I called it eBay, that's going to be the name of the folder with the database in it. The database does not have any actual data in it at the moment, but after I run insert statements, it will. Let me just delete this just to prove a point. So it's gone, and now I'm going to run my code again. Again, it's going to take a few seconds to build those structures. And then we'll pick apart some of these, the SQL syntax here. Okay, so I have success, and I pull up the project folder, and there it is again. So again, if you ever need like a clean start, just go into your project folder, delete that database, and then you can start again from scratch. So let's take a look at this. So again, let me remind you what these actual tables kind of look like behind the scenes. We have the period table with an ID and a period name, and then the item table with the item number, item description, the location, the opening bid, and the period ID, which is a foreign key referencing the period table. So they are in really a one-to-many relationship. Like one period, like the Victorian period, for example, might yield many antiques for sale, and it does. You can tell in this table we have a lot of ones there. Okay, so looking at these statements, the SQL statements, we're executing these SQL statements through this statement object, okay? These are just create table statements. And if you have taken a database class with me at Marine especially, you'll be able to read these very easily. If you haven't had any database, these are kind of self-explanatory. The language is pretty friendly. We're creating the table, period. And I'm just like kind of cutting these up and concatenating them, but you can use my code as a model. Could I do like one long statement going all the way out to the right? Yeah, I could have, but it looks better if you just cut it up a little bit. But so syntax is important though, like the parentheses, the commas, those matter. So you have to be extra careful when you're doing this for real. So the period ID is an integer column. We're making that the primary key. And then the period name is a varchar. I told you that's like a string type in database talk, and we're saying that's 50 characters max. Okay, so that's the period table, and now the item table. We have a few more columns in this one. It's item number, an integer, that is the primary key. We have the description, the location, the opening bid. We said that's a double. And then we have the foreign key here, which is the period ID. It too is an integer, and it references the period table. Within the period table, it references the period ID. So that's like pointing back or referencing this column within the period table. That's how you set up a foreign key, or which is basically a relational database here. Okay, so those are the create table statements. So the database that's it. We have a nice little relational database. No data in it yet, but that's all it took to create those structures. So I will comment those out, and then I will uncomment all of the inserts. So we've got some insert statements here. Okay, again, this is a lot of busy work, but these are, again, structured query language or SQL statements, insert statements, I'm just inserting a bunch of records at once, and you can kind of see what I'm doing. The period ID, the period name for each record, okay, each period. I'm just putting it into a huge string called period inserts, and then I'm executing the period inserts. And then I do the same for the items. There's a lot more data here, obviously, but just a huge string with all that busy work, and then I'm executing those as well. Okay, very importantly, and I'll run this in just a moment, but very importantly, when you're done, clean up after yourself. And by that I mean close the statement object, close the connection object, those objects that you created above, here and here, Don't leave them hanging open. As a rule of thumb, you just want to open your connection to the database when you're actually using it to put data in or take data out. But don't just leave it open all the time just because it's convenient. It's not. You want to keep those closed. So that's it. I typically will give a message to the user so they have some kind of feedback, because otherwise there's no output in this program whatsoever. And yeah, that's it. We're catching a generic exception at the end. So let me go ahead and run these. Again, it's going to take a while to insert all those records. Okay, and now they're in the database. So now I have my database, and in the next example, I will show you how to query data from the database and get it back out.